Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to Accelerated Health Radio and TV. I am your host, Sarah Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of 3 teenagers. I believe that your body does want to and is capable of rebuilding and healing itself regardless of what chronic disease you may have. I'm here for you to answer your questions and bring you innovative and cutting-edge technology and health solutions to empower you in your ability to reach your optimal state of health. Today, my guest will be talking about individualized nutrition and how some foods we think are healthy are poison to your body. And I know that you really need that strong physical foundation to work on your mental growth, whether it's overcoming anxiety and depression, losing weight, or detoxing your body in the proper way, and even increasing your level of frequency in life. You need a strong physical foundation of health in order to gain the willpower to make bigger changes in your life. If you're new to following me, I specialize in helping you get there. You can find my health articles, my cutting-edge natural supplements, devices, and protocols at acceleratedhealthproducts.com. I dive into an array of health conditions, their causes and symptoms, and how to address them naturally. I've spent thousands of dollars and hours of my time biohacking different supplements, technologies, and diets that don't work, so you don't have to. If you have any health issues you need help with, you can email me directly through the website. I personally read every single one. Accelerated Health Products is the sponsor of this show, so as you support my website, I'm able to bring you more cutting-edge content and the guests to the show. Today, we are going to be diving in to how to get the right nutrition for your specific needs, reduce any systemic inflammation in the body, and allowing it to heal. With that, I wanted to discuss a few supplements that can help aid in that process and speed up your results. First, the accelerated keto. This keto supplement is unlike most because it comes in capsule form, where most come in a shake, and they need those fake sugar and carbs to hide the horrible taste of ketones. And those fillers could be causing inflammation and weight gain. It provides the energy for muscles and brain while controlling your appetite so that you can easily intermittent fast and squeeze your eating window within a 4 to 8 hour period, which inherently reduces systemic inflammation and allows your body to heal leaky gut and improve your immune system. It also helps stimulate the metabolic shift away from glucose dependence and towards burning your own body fat. And you get a constant source of clean energy that lasts for 8 to 12 hours without the jitters. It also supports mental focus, allows your brain to use ketones for energy, and gets rid of that brain fog that so many suffer from. It also allows the cells to produce 10 times the amount of energy than from glucose. And it reduces the craving for carbs and sugars and helps support a low carb diet. Too many carbs are inflammatory to the body. It helps it make it easier to stick to that low carb diet, regardless if you're eating a full ketogenic diet or just trying to cut your carbs. Number 2 is My Vital C. And this is not vitamin C, but it's actually 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. It is a carbon 60. It's known as an antibiotic, and it also improves sleep, which is essential for that immune system. Not to mention that it doubles your lifespan. It reduces inflammation throughout the body, which leads to that increased longevity, lower risk of heart disease, improved eyesight, improved mental acuity, lowers your blood pressure, helps manage osteoarthritis, increases strength and vitality, protects your nervous system. It helps with hair growth and hair color, and it helps even with neck, back, hip, and knee pain. Number 3, this is my favorite. I will never go without it. Acceleridine iodine. It is the wild card in supporting the immune system. Not only is it anti-inflammatory, but it's antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, antimicrobial, antiseptic, antioxidant, anti-allergenic, antihistamine, and so much more. And it produces and performs that unique function known as healthy apoptosis. Apoptosis is the natural death of traumatized and unhealthy cells. There is no pathogen resistant to iodine. In fact, iodine was used to protect people from the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic that killed over 30 million people. So apply that to what we're going through right now. It seems like it's obvious. All of these immune system and immune boosting benefits are in addition to iodine's key role for the metabolism and the thyroid. And the thyroid produces T4. 4 stands for 4 iodine atoms. So without iodine, the thyroid is unable to produce that T4, which is necessary for the immune system. And it's the most important spiritual supplement as it relieves depression and brain fog and helps you connect with your higher self. I talk a lot about how to increase your frequency. This is one way. Well, what this means is living at a higher level of awareness and spirituality. The scalar frequency embedded in the acceleridine detoxes your pineal gland, which connects you to your higher self, clears that brain fog, and awakens you. No other iodine supplement does this. And lastly, the accelerated scalar silver. This is like the acceleridine, that it is also treated with scalar technology. Not only does the silver have an alkaline pH of over 8.0, it creates that environment that foreign pathogens cannot survive in, and it's programmed with bioinformational scalar technology to further strengthen the immune system and devitalize foreign pathogens. And like this acceleridine, with these two, you are going to lift your higher state of being or your higher frequency. Furthermore, we use microclustered water technology to lower the surface tension for better absorption. So now to the good stuff. Teri Cochrane is an integrative practitioner and leader in sustainable health and longevity. She's the founder of the Global Sustainable Health Institute and has developed the Cochrane method, which integrates a multi-level bio-individualized metabolic health modality. She launched her groundbreaking and best-selling book in 2018, The Wildatarian Diet, Living as Nature Intended. Teri received her Bachelor of Science from the University of Florida and an advanced degree from Huntington School of Health Scientists. She's trained in craniosacral herbology, healing touch, and a certified coach practitioner. She has also spent nearly 20 years as an executive for a Fortune 500 company. Welcome, Teri. How are you this afternoon?
So good to see you.
This is such a treat to have you on. There are some basic guidelines in nutrition that most people can agree on, like cutting out the sugar and the carbs and the processed foods. But then you get into a different dietary approach like veganism and keto and carnivore, and I've tried all of them. But what I haven't tried up until this week is eating for my DNA because of you. And my immune system has been pretty strong, and a lot of my gut issues have, I'd say, gotten 80% better, but they haven't been perfect. So now that I've engaged in your program, I'm really excited to see the long-term effects. And it's only been 5 days and I already feel even better. And I talked to you, 2 days ago? I've already seen another improvement in the last 48 hours. So it truly has humbled me in my work and how I approach my clients as well. And I always say that God gives me the gift of my health issues so I can find the answers to help others. And wow, he has given me a lot of gifts when it comes to my genetics, as you can speak to. So I thought first we could start with how you came to doing what you're doing and discover the process of creating the individual plans for your clients.
Sure. Well, I'd love to share that with you. And if you would have asked me 20 years ago what I would be doing today, never in a million years would I have shared with you I'm going to have launched this Global Sustainable Health Institute, this whole movement on eating to your genetic blueprint and your current state of health. But sometimes, as you say, life gives us these unexpected gifts that don't come wrapped as a gift, but indeed they are. My son, as I was moving through my corporate career, by the age of 3, we were told he would have brain seizures, that he wouldn't be normal, that he wouldn't grow past 5'4". And we went to all the practitioners, endocrinologists, pediatricians, allergists, and he was just falling off the cliff. He started having life-threatening asthma. We lived in the hospital. He had bleeding eczema. He was a sick little boy. And it was really interesting, Sarah. I was going through the many of her pictures, like 1,000 pictures this weekend. And you could see in his early years, he just was such a sick child, the allergic chiners. And if you look at his classmates, there was the classmates of all the boys. And then my son was like here. He was just so much smaller than anyone else and really was struggling. So sometimes God puts those, hidden gifts in our life so that we can really find our purpose. And I realized that, what if it doesn't have to be this way? And I continued my day job, but then I really made it my mission to try to find his healing path, and not being skilled, but being a really good researcher. I hadn't gone back to school at the time. I really found that food was his linchpin, that the foods I was feeding him was literally poisoning my son, and they were healthy foods. And once I made that connection, things started changing for him. Within 4 days, he started breathing. The allergic shriners started receding. And then over time, he's now a very healthy 26-year-old. And that was the impetus for me to say one day, okay, I think I'm going to go start another career and be that mother for other mothers that was told your son will be broken or your child will be broken. And that's just the way it's going to be.
Well, and for the audience, he's not just a healthy boy. I think he's pretty accomplished, and you're welcome to brag a little bit about what he is doing and where he has come from.
Well, that boy that they said couldn't was the valediction speaker at his high school. He was on a full academic ride to University of Virginia, which is considered a public Ivy. He was a varsity swimmer. He was a gold medalist in karate at the Junior Olympics. He's a singer. And now he's really into social justice and really giving back. So he's just a really good, rounded, in-service man.
And you can't do any of that if you don't have energy or you're not functioning right. And it's just crazy when people say, diet doesn't really matter or whatever. I mean, I am just laughing as you're talking about thinking you're feeding your kids the right thing, and how God or the universe, for whatever your beliefs are, uses your children to teach you these lessons, because sometimes we won't do the right thing for ourselves, but we'll do it for our children. I just a week ago, before I met with you, I'm looking at my fridge and I have all the wrong foods for me and my daughter. But what's interesting, and I was going to tell you this, is that we ate some foods that I've been abstaining from last night, and I felt great. But my other daughter, she says, Mom, I can't eat this. So what's funny is that it doesn't, a healthy food is great for my one daughter and me, and not great for my other daughter. And it's going to be really interesting to see what her tests come back as. But let's first start talking about veggies. So we all think vegetables and fruits are healthy, and some contain sulfur, some have lectins, some have oxalates. So can you go over the difference of the three and what types of vegetables are in each group?
Sure. So even as a backdrop to that, why has the vegetable landscape changed? The fruit landscape changed, those that contain lectins, oxalates, and sulfur. Well, my belief through the work of this brilliant biochemist from MIT, Dr. Stephanie Seneff, she has proven that the active ingredient in Roundup, sprayed liberally on our crops by the name of glyphosate, has really impaired the body's ability to process sulfur-containing compounds, because it doesn't allow it to fully convert from sulfur as we take it into sulfate, which is what we need. So eating these sulfur-rich vegetables, which I'll get to in a minute, can really be a problem, especially if you're like you and I, and we have certain genetic predispositions.
Can I stop you real quick with a question? So if you're talking about someone that doesn't have the problem with sulfur-containing foods like you and me, just by introducing glyphosate into their system, do they then have that problem?
That's a really good question. And Ben Lynch wrote a great book called Dirty Genes. And that means that you will be symptomatic even though you're not genetically predisposed. So I think that for those of us that have the genes, clearly we're more vulnerable. But those of us that don't have the genetic predisposition, if we continue consuming the glyphosate, then that glyphosate will interrupt that channel. And so it's just going to make it overall more difficult for us to process those foods. Similarly with oxalates, also very healthy foods, and I'll get to the food groups and what's in the oxalates as well, is that the body's ability to make the microbacteria that helps metabolize oxalates, that glyphosate has interrupted our ability to make that. So we have a less diverse population. And I believe there's a couple of companies out in Europe that are actually trying to create a probiotic that will replenish those gut bacteria that have been decimated by the glyphosate, which then make oxalates a problem. And I will tell you, until about 5 years ago, I could easily consume sulfur-rich and oxalate-rich foods, and I can no longer do that. And I think that there's been a tipping point within our food supply and within our microbiology that has made that happen. And my first book was very pro-sulfuric compounds, because the compounds, what are they? So they are the cruciferous vegetables like cauliflower and broccoli and bok choy and cabbage and arugula and kale, which now I call a killer kale because it's both an oxalate and a sulfur, and it's very sensitive to pesticides. So it's like a sponge for the pesticides. So all crucifers are sulfuric. Garlic and onion are sulfuric. Egg yolks are sulfuric. And so that's really interesting. And even animal meat has some sulfur, but it has other corresponding amino acids that make that sulfur easier to assimilate. So we don't get the impact from the animal products than we do from the vegetable, because they don't have that, which makes us able to process it much easier. So the sulfur compounds can be a real problem. And the reason why they're so problematic, it's been linked to 73% of RA, rheumatoid arthritis, has been linked to sulfur impairment processing. So joint pain, arthritis, mental health, ADHD, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, IBD, IBS. So that gut and mental health and joint health has really been linked to that.
It's very interesting how I'll talk to clients and they'll say, well, I don't have any gut issues. My stomach feels fine. But, oh, yeah, I do have pain, or I do have headaches, or I have brain fog. And that's, my husband has an iron gut, quote unquote. He never has stomach problems, but he will suffer from inflammation in his nasal passages or headaches and other things like that. And it's definitely something you're eating. And I mean, all the foods that you just listed off, they were in my refrigerator last week. Every single one. So and what's interesting is over the last 5 years, the period of time when I went carnivore, which I don't think is a sustainable diet, but it is where I felt the best, because I had eliminated the vegetables that I was prone to be eating, and I was avoiding a group of vegetables that you're telling me that I am allowed to eat. So I was scared to eat any vegetables, right? So let's talk about the oxalates and the lectins.
Sure. So oxalates are those vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds and legumes that have this oxalate, which is a protective mechanism for these food groups. Why oxalates are problematic is that if you've heard of the oxalate crystals in kidney stones and gallstones, those are crystals. So oxalates form crystals. And so oxalates can also help increase are molds. So aspergillus helps build oxalates, and oxalates promote mold. So what's really interesting is in the autistic community, oxalates are a big deal. And we see that these children, so with oxalates being, for example, peanut butter, peanuts are a big oxalates. Peanuts are also aflatoxic, meaning that they have heavy mold. Okay, almonds are oxalates, spinach, black beans, those are oxalates, beets are oxalates, berries are oxalates. And if you think about berries, these again in the spectrum of autism, a lot of berries also have salicylates, which have to do with a nervous system function. And so these foods, healthy foods, and coconut is a moderate oxalate, can potentially be problematic. And so these kids that have candida, which is a fungal organism, which feeds on oxalates, frankly, because it's fungal and aspergillus is a fungus, they're told if you have candida to get away from cow milk and start consuming almond or coconut milk. And those are oxalates. And so these kids continue to fall off the cliff, and they don't know why, because now they're eating healthy foods. And again, why is this such a problem? Well, it's because we no longer make the micro bacteria that helped to assimilate these otherwise healthy foods. And we know that with candida, you can get constipated. And so what's one of the biggest things for children for constipation? Miralax. Well, guess what Miralax contains? Oxalates. And so these kids are really being slammed. And I'm speaking to children in particular because we see so much in our practice, of course, adults, but it's really impairing cognitive function.
Yeah. Because
then oxalates and fungus which then leads to potentially a strep being elevated. It impairs the dopamine channel, so it leads to how can they sleep, how can they think, and it becomes a really big deal.
What's interesting, because I've got multiple friends that have autistic children, is they are also told to stay away from gluten. Well, what does someone do when they're staying away from gluten? They're doing corn chips, corn popcorn, corn in general, and that's full of glyphosates and all these other, and mold, correct?
Exactly. Yes.
So
yes, they have mycotoxins, which are mold.
Yeah. And so lectins, this is something that I steered away from as soon as I read Plant Paradox. Why are they okay for me? And why aren't they not as and okay for certain people, but not okay for others? Like my one daughter said, Mom, 3 bites of this squash, I'm bloated.
So again, it gets back to your genetic blueprinting and also the level of gut bacteria that you contain. And so lectins can be broken down by the cooking process, and not all lectins are created equal, right? So certain squash and certain beans have lectins. Now, for example, though, this is what I call the hierarchy of needs in a body. If you look at chickpea is a lectin, it's a bean. However, it's also really high in molybdenum. Molybdenum is a mineral that's super necessary in the sulfur pathway for processing. So molybdenum is actually a mineral that we give in many a times if you have impaired sulfur processing. Chickpea is also a natural prebiotic. So if the hierarchy of needs of your body is bigger for you to receive that molybdenum and receive that prebiotic, then the body will say, I can still eat that because I get a net benefit from that constituent. And so, for example, eggs, back to sulfur. The egg yolk is highly sulfuric. It also is very rich in choline. So if you have another genetic predisposition that requires you to have choline, then if you soft boil the eggs, if you poach them, if you over easy them, then the egg will have a richer level of choline than it does if you do hard boiled, which becomes higher in sulfur. And so hierarchically, you can still do them. Can you do them all the time? Maybe not, but you can still do them because the body has a need to extract that other benefit from that thing.
That makes sense. We're going to take a quick break, but someone just asked, how can you cook for a family if they all have different DNA? I will let you know next week. One thing that I do is when I cook my vegetables, I do them on a big pan and I will separate them. I'll do just a smorgasbord of the different vegetables and I'll roast them all at once. And then everyone has their little area of the pan that they eat from. So that's my trick. If someone else has a better idea, let me know. We're going to take a short commercial break and come back with Teri. Welcome back to Accelerated Health Radio. I'm your host, Sarah Banta, the owner of Accelerated Health Products. And today we have Teri Cochrane talking about individualized nutrition. Teri, let's talk about sulfur or oxalates. Those vegetables, especially the sulfur, you need it in your body. So how does one person abstain from eating it, but still get the benefits of what is needed in the body?
So that's a great question. And so that goes back to eating certain meats that have sulfuric compounds, that have the complementing amino acids that allow you to entertain that sulfur. Another way for us to manage what I call those kind of not center lane foods, but more the fringe foods, is to look to see where your body is looking for that other constituent within that sulfur processing family. So for example, cauliflower. I call cauliflower and broccoli the kinder, gentler sulfur kids. And so cauliflower is really high in manganese, and manganese is really important for calming the nervous system. And so if there's a need for that, that would be positive. But what I say is don't eat it in a concentrated form like a cauliflower pizza or cauliflower rice. Maybe, and don't eat it raw, because cooking does help break something down. So you could have roasted cauliflower. Or for example, if you have super high estrogen, right? And we know that the cruciferous vegetables contain indole 3-carbinol, which helps pull estrogen. Then for a short time, you might be able to do a little bit of cauliflower or a little bit of cabbage, which also contains a really high level of L-glutamine, which L-glutamine is super important in managing insulin, and insulin is related to estrogen. And so you see that, you see those benefits, but you are wise with them. And you wouldn't juice with, for example, a cabbage, or you wouldn't juice with a kale, because that goes, when you're juicing, it's a nutrition IV, that there's not a lot of digestion and it goes really fast to your system. Mm-hmm. Conversely, if you're super low thyroid, then also those crucifers, which are also called goitrogens, are going to slow your thyroid. So you really have to do a dance around what is my genetic blueprint and what is my current state of health. And that really is the whole underpinning of the Wildatarian diet, is to navigate this dance in life, is where am I, who am I, and where am I, right? And then not expressing those genes. So how do we help support that which we need support with? Well, we know that molybdenum for sulfur, unless you have high uric acid levels and you have a family history of gout, because high levels of molybdenum will increase gout. And then the other thing is P5P, which is a form of vitamin B6 that is super helpful in improving sulfur processing mechanisms, or zinc, which is really important in increasing our phase 1 liver detoxification pathways. The sulfation pathway is part of phase 2 liver detoxification. And in a lot of my clients where they also have methylation issues, this is where we're missing methyl donors, and it makes it hard for us to manage proteins and produce sufficient hydrochloric acid and bring our neurotransmitters across the blood-brain barrier. But if they have methylation issues and they also have a lot of other genes that are excitatory, then actually giving you B12 in the form of methyl B12 can actually be excitatory. We don't do that. So the way that we get through methylation is helping sulfation. So it's just this really beautiful, intricate dance. And the Cochrane method, which really speaks to how I look at the body, it seems the algorithm is complex, but its application, it's really simple. And once you know it and you can apply it, I even have an 8-year-old that I've known since she was 10 months old. She's like, excuse me, is this sulfur free? Is this gluten free? Is this mold free? Miss Teri says I can't eat those. And she knows because her body feels so much better. And so you can really become body literate when you really understand the why. And what happens is there's so much noise in our body. Like you said, you didn't know what vegetables, you were scared to eat any vegetable when you went carnivore, because when you did, it didn't make you feel good. And you didn't know because it was noisy. And now you're starting to see it.
This is something that I was going to bring up later on, but we should touch on it now. Just how I talk about increasing your frequency through supplements and diet. Well, you've talked about how you can lower the vibration of food just by your thoughts. So here I was totally scared of eating certain foods. Well, of course, anything that I eat is going to make me sick just because of my thoughts alone.
Absolutely. The thought creates the thing. And we now know that physics is showing that our thinking has currency, and everything exists in possibility and potentiality. And once we put an intention or a thinking around it, we're actually creating a wave, a frequency wave that's going to facilitate that, potentially that outcome, is if we keep thinking about it. We also know that when we are afraid about anything, it actually stops the body's ability to produce sufficient hydrochloric acid. So just by that very nature, we are not going to be really good at it or efficient at digesting anything.
Right.
Peristalsis, there's so much tied to our nervous system, our thinking, and our digestive capacity.
One thing that I wanted to touch on with the HCl, because I know that I don't naturally produce a lot. Now, is that a genetic thing, or is that because of my diet up until now? And can it correct without digestive enzymes, or will I need those digestive enzymes for the rest of my life?
Okay, so really great question. So when we don't have methyl donors, if I can speak about your genes, you've got one of each of the alleles, the C677T and the A1298C, which goes to methylation. So you're not a great producer of hydrochloric acid. Right. Neither am I. I'm compound heterozygous, as they say. I got one from each parent. And so we're just going to be a less efficient producer of hydrochloric acid, which is necessary to break down protein. The next thing is that, again, if we're in a state of stress, the pituitary can't signal to the esophageal sphincter, hey, make hydrochloric acid. So how do we get around that? Well, I really love trimethylglycine, because glycine is super important in the production of betaine, which is a precursor to hydrochloric acid. And betaine is really great, which comes from beets, which I love. However, again, this is where we get super nuanced. If you have a massive oxalate issue, you can't do betaine.
Right.
So, and digestive enzymes are really important. And to speak further to digestive enzymes, if you have a high mold sensitivity because you have the HLA-DQ2 gene and you have been tripped by mold in the past, then betaine is not good, because betaine is an oxalate which will exacerbate mold. So in that case, and digestive enzymes that are plant-based, that are made from aspergillus, which is a mold, is going to be no bueno. So you go to a digestive enzyme that's bromelain based, right? So, or papain from pineapple. And again, doing the dance. Who are you and how are you?
Oh my goodness, getting down to it. Wow. Well, I know we're going through this so quickly and we're going to run out of time. So I want to make sure we talk about why wild meats versus the conventional and what are the amyloids. This is something that people don't realize when they go out to restaurants and they're ordering the chicken Caesar salad, which they think they're being healthy, right? So can we talk about the amyloids and what are they and what the difference is in wild meats?
Absolutely. So again, the Wildatarian, living as nature intended, that was born from a very sick client that had end-stage cancer and was given his last rites. And he had a very complex and rare cancer by the name of amyloidosis, which are amyloids that are wrapped around his heart. 2 rounds of chemo put him into congestive heart and kidney failure. And so he was really told, there's nothing we can do. Somehow they found me right after he was given that, go home and take care of your affairs. And I started doing research and I thought, wow, what is this amyloid? This was almost a decade ago. And amyloids, what are amyloids? And I had a scientific researcher on my staff at the time who used to be a genetics researcher at the National Institutes of Health. And I said, Sarah, her name is Sarah as well, go and find what the heck is this? And we found that amyloids actually are made in our body as part of it's an inflammatory response, as part of the homeostatic environment to help us get back to normal. Little inflammation, the body assimilates them, and then we get back to normal. However, our food supply, with its crowding conditions and the way we feed our animals, and this is the studies that we found out of Cambridge in Japan, and then we have many citations in our book that speak to this, found that these crowding conditions were creating amyloids in the tissues of our non-wild, particularly chicken. And so chicken is the most studied. It's very crowded in it because DNA, they have short lifestyles, and we know that DNA passes through multiple generations now, not just in us, but in our animals. And so I have deemed chicken the dirty bird because it's the most studied. It really affects our body's ability to digest protein. So chicken, beef, pork, and turkey. Chicken and beef are the most studied, but we've extrapolated to pork and turkey if they're grown domestically and not grown in a humane and sustainable way. And what we found was that when we stopped feeding the body these amyloids, this gentleman, within 3 months, the light chains that measure amyloids, they were normalized. And so he was able to go back, start his chemo, and he's a healthy man almost a decade later. He's a beautiful man who now rides his bike to work. And I think he may be even retired by now, Glenn. So he's really just he was the genesis of the Wildatarian. But what we found is these truncated protein structures, these amyloids, we know about them in the world of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Well, now study shows that they are responsible for contributing to almost 80% of chronic conditions in our country: diabetes, cancer, autoimmunity, kidney disease, of course, the Parkinson's and the Alzheimer's. Are they solely contributing? No, but are they contributing? Yes. And so we have found through the thousands of clients that have adopted this low amyloid and eating to your genetic blueprint if you have low sulfur, low oxalate, and low fat if you have a lot of stress response and can't break down fats, eating to your genetic blueprint, that people really maximize their health. And I've seen it over and over and over again, and especially myself, because these amyloids help trip the reactivation of pathogenic loads, also found in the clinical literature.
And so these amyloids are not found in the elk and the deer and the bison and the wild meats. Is that correct?
Yes. What we find is the amyloid burden is much lower empirically. They've not been studied, but empirically, and we see it through the transformation of our client base. And we know that, however, if we start crowding these animals, they will also start having these same issues. But what we know is when you stop the amyloids will resolve if you stop crowding these animals. But they also, there was a Michigan State study that crowded ducks, and within 6 months, most of them had amyloids and had then passed. So it's literally the way that we are treating our food supply, whether it's a fish with the toxic waters, or the chickens with its crowding and feeding them foods that they can't break down, and the cows feeding them corn, and they're herbivores, and that's not something that their stomachs can take, or in feeding them hormones and antibiotics and pesticides. We are what we eat, truly. I did not make up that slogan, but it's a beautiful slogan. And when our food supply becomes a toxic burden, we become a toxic burden, and then we have to deal with it.
So now we've talked a lot about what we are eating. I want to talk about what we're not eating, meaning what you referenced to the dirty cupcake. And this is something that I eat every single day and would like to stop my body from eating. So can you explain your theory on the dirty cupcake?
Yes. So the dirty cupcake is when we push the stress hormones of cortisol and adrenaline. And why do I call it a dirty cupcake? Because it is both a fat and a sugar. And so when we are over secreting those stress hormones that are signaled by the pituitary to tell the adrenals, secrete, what happens is we're forcing our body to manage a high sugar load. Because why do we make cortisol and adrenaline? So we can push a lot of sugar into our muscles so we can go run or fight because we're in imminent danger. And so this slow drip of a constant cortisol and epinephrine over time makes, one, it opens up the tight junctions of our gut, meaning that stress hormone is going to make our gut leaky. It turns on all those little pathogens that we have happily living in our gut. It gives them fire. So all of a sudden they become bullies. So we're less robust against Candida and Streptococcus and E. coli and parasitic pathogens that we have living. 80% of us are hosts to these unfriendly kidlets. And it is a sugar, which then will create this dysglycemia because you've just had a dirty cupcake. So the body response was, uh-oh, I just ate a dirty cupcake. I better push a lot of insulin. Oh my gosh, I really didn't need anything. And now we've over-secreted insulin. I didn't really need to secrete that insulin. What do we do with insulin? It's called the fat storage hormone. So all of a sudden, insulin starts developing around our belly middle. And then the liver has to work harder because it just released another fat. And so it just becomes this cycle. And over time, we become insulin resistant. And now we have both high blood sugar and high blood insulin. That's very inflammatory. And so that can lead to a cascading event of autoimmunity and chronic illness.
And not to mention that when we're stressed, we stress eat to make things even worse. So there's a lot of people that say, well, I lose my appetite when you're stressed. And there's a reason for it, right? Your body's telling you you don't need anything. But some people go in the other direction and they binge and make things even worse. Well, I know we're almost at our time, and I know some people will be able to contact you and get the test and find out what their DNA is telling them. But for people who can't do that, what are some symptoms people should look for when they eat certain foods? And if they're eating one oxalate or one sulfur-containing food and they feel bloated or bad from it, does that mean that they should cut out the whole food group?
Great question. So I think it depends, again, where you are in your health continuum. If you're generally healthy and you feel like you can put up with some bloating here and there, that's your personal decision. I always say I'd rather be optimally happy in every part of my digestive tract and my joints and my mood and in my energy levels. So we do have a quiz on our website that you can take to find out what wild type you are. Which will give you some guidance around that. But what are some signs? Okay, so let's start with protein malabsorption, right? Just generally, if you're burping a lot, that means you're not great at digesting protein. If you have trouble building muscle, you work out, you can't build that muscle. If you get really foggy-headed and hypoglycemia, because dysglycemia is not just around the sugar, it's also around our body's ability to disassemble those proteins into amino acids. So that's kind of I have a protein issue. For sulfur, we talked about it. If you have IBS, IBD, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, arthritis, the itises, relates to joint. If you have anxiety, because there's the CBS gene that goes to sulfur processing, I call it central broadcasting station, anxiety, depression linked to that. So those are things that are related to that. In terms of oxalates, if you have kidney stones, gallstones, if you have oxalate crystals of any kind, arteriosclerosis has been linked to hardening of the arteries. Some oxalate crystals, also sulfur. So that if you have a lot of mold in your history, that could be stay away from those oxalates. Also, if you can't sleep, if you have anxiety and depression, oxalates and sulfur are kind of linked together in that continuum. Fat. So if you have a loose stool and it floats, you're not processing your fats. If you have acne, if you have a lot of PMS or PMDD, if you have, you eat fat and you feel nauseous. If you wake up in the morning and you're nauseous, that may be a function of your inability to process all those big fats. Keto is not for everyone. If you're eating a lot of nuts and you feel terrible, I had a woman that said, oh, she's a client of mine. She said, Teri, you're right. Nuts made me nuts because that impaired her body's ability to use the hormones she was making. She hit a fat tipping point, and so she wasn't using her hormones or her neurohormones, which are the neurotransmitters. So those are easy body talk. It's a body talk. If you swell, that's edema, that's fat metabolism as well.
That is me. And I follow and have been following a ketogenic, quote unquote, diet. I do my accelerated keto supplement, but I've noticed that I do a low carb diet more than a keto diet. I don't eat a ton of fat because when I do, I get nauseous and I get bloated. And all of the symptoms you just mentioned, they are me describing me exactly. Well, we want to make sure that you can tell people where to find your book and where to find you. You are amazing at what you're doing. And I want to get you out there because it's, you've changed my life just in the last week. So I am so, so grateful. But tell people where they can find you and what your process is.
Absolutely. So TeriCochrane.com, just Google my name and you'll find me there, and you can come. We have a naturopath that works in our office who does nutrigenomic analysis that helps you figure out your genes. And because we see people from all over the country and beyond, if you can't come see us in person, I do my own applied kinesiology muscle testing in office, so we can get really granular there. The Wildatarian book is found on Amazon. If you can't see us and you don't want to do a genetics testing, the Heal and Seal program, which is the adjunct to the Wildatarian book, there's a 45-day reset and a long-term play. And then if you're interested in our bigger project, which is the Global Sustainable Health Institute, it's globalsustainablehealthinstitute.com, where we're taking our platform to teach and to start corporate programs and to really scale it one to many, because we do believe that, we have to pay forward what we've learned, and that the landscape of what we thought was healthy is no longer healthy. And we have to be that ever curious mind to shift as our planet and our macrobiology shifts.
Absolutely. I always say, like I said in the beginning, God is using me to show me my weaknesses so I can help others. And my humility is huge, especially this week from what you've taught me. And I just am hoping to share the knowledge and really help more people than ever. So thank you, Teri. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If I can help you with your health issues, you can contact me directly at sarah@acceleratedhealthproducts.com. I'm happy to put together a protocol for you. I know sometimes it's hard to know where to start. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products, and my YouTube channel under Accelerated Health Radio. You can find this episode and all my episodes on iHeart Radio, iTunes, Stitcher, Pandora, or whatever podcast platform you subscribe to. I now do Accelerated Health Bites, where I do short informational videos about health topics or a topic that you may want me to address. So let me know. And if you like what you heard today, please hit the subscribe button and share with a few of your friends who may need my help. As you share this channel, it helps me help more people like you and bring more cutting edge guests on my show like Teri. Don't miss next week's interview, and you can find the supplements and all the videos at acceleratedhealthproducts.com. You can use coupon W4HC20 for 20% off site-wide. As you support Accelerated Health Products, I'm able to bring you this show and the amazing guests. Thanks for joining us here on Accelerated Health Radio. Have a great week. Thanks, Teri.